for it to load, and I'll let you know.
I think we're good to go. Hi, everyone. My name is Gary Paramanathan. I'm the Outreach Manager here at Afters. I'd like to start off by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation while I'm working from home today. I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging, and recognize that sovereignty was never ceded. Welcome to hashtag I Am Not a Virus Showcase, 5 screenworks responding to COVID-related racism. This is a project by Diversity Arts Australia, and we'd like to acknowledge all the hard work that went into bringing this project to light, especially to Claire, Kevin, and of course, Lena Naholos. Today, we're in conversation with 5 Asian Australian artists as we speak about art, identity, and COVID-related racism. As part of my role at Afters, the outreach team champions inclusive practices and support a diverse group of screen creatives. Diversity to Afters means a screen community and culture that is representative of all Australians, including those from non-Anglo-Celtic cultural backgrounds, people with a disability, people with diverse gender and sexual orientation, and those with geographic and other socioeconomic disadvantages. We'll be taking questions towards the end of the hour, but please type up your questions in the chat if you're in the Zoom or in the Facebook Live in the comments, and they'll be sent to us and we will bring them up when appropriate. So I'd like to now introduce the panel. Please welcome filmmaker and photographer Jackie Dixon, writer and filmmaker Teresa Li, documentary maker Thuy Nguyen, cabaret and music star Dyan, and actor, martial artist, and filmmaker Maria Tran. Welcome. And support a diverse group of screen actor, martial artist. I think someone is have the live streaming open, so you might have to close that. I might start off by asking you to introduce yourself and tell us where you're joining us from today, and tell us a little bit about what attracted you to this project. So I'll start with Thuy.
Hi everyone, my name is Thuy, and I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining you from the land of the Cabral clan of the Darug Nation, and I'd also like to thank Afters and Diversity Arts for creating this event today.
Thanks, Thuy. Jackie?
Yeah, I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. And yeah.
Thank you. Dyan?
Hey everyone, I am Dyan in from Gadigal country. Thank you so much for having me. I'm actually really excited about this.
Thank you. Teresa?
Hi, I'm Teresa. I'm on Gadigal land and I'm excited to be here.
And Maria?
Yep, Maria Tran, filmmaker, actor, dialing in from Las Vegas, Nevada. And I'm so glad to be here.
5:30 in the morning. We appreciate it, Maria.
Oh, 5:30 p.m. So it's not as bad.
Oh, okay. That's not too bad. So I'm going to start off. I'm not going to ask you if you've experienced anti-Asian hate during the pandemic, because I bet you have. It's really about how much and whether it's the little microaggressions or the classic Australian passive aggressiveness or something much more endangering to you. Does anyone feel comfortable sharing an experience? And before you do, I just want to give a trigger warning to the audience. Some of the conversations that we'll be having today and some of the works from the series contain words and graphic references of racial and gender violence that may be upsetting to some viewers. And if you do feel distressed by any of this, please visit the I Am Not a Virus website for a list of support services, including a link to Asian Australian mental health practitioner list that's listed on there. So yeah, does anyone want to share an experience or that if you're comfortable of something that you've experienced during the pandemic? No? Well, I might start then. Jackie, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I actually just have been talking to my mother about a story, if you would like me to share her story, because I think it's just really, yeah, she's an Australian citizen. She's been here for more than 20 years, and recently she lives in Tasmania. Recently, she went into a cafe with two of her friends who are also of Asian background. And yeah, I think there's a really interesting experience we can have with sort of being thought of as coming from the mainland and bringing the virus, of course. And when she walked into the cafe, the person moved all of the other sort of white people there to the back of the room. And then she told my mum, we don't like having mainland flies around here. And my mum was like, I've been here for 20 years. I, live in Tasmania. My friends have also been here for more than 10 years. And she just kind of refused to believe her and was like, no, you may have been living here, but the other two aren't. And yeah, they ended up just leaving. But I thought that was a really sort of powerful encapsulation of sort of the experiences that we might be going through in Australia. Yeah,
exactly. This idea that no matter how much you've been at a place, you never really belong, right? So
yeah.
Anyone else have anything to share or add to that?
Yeah, I think for me a few years ago, in terms of the racism, I knew it was happening, but I didn't think it was going to happen to me until when I was living in Fairfield. I went to the shops, and then I had a kid. Didn't walk up to me, looked at me, and just kept on chanting "Corona, Corona," and he kept on eyeing me. And I'm like, okay, it's kind of weird. And then the mom looked at me and looked at the kid, and she pulled the kid aside. It's okay, she's gonna go soon. And I was like, what was that about? I'm wearing a mask. Is it because I'm wearing a mask, or because I'm an Asian person wearing a mask? And I was holding this weird feeling inside, and there's a part of me saying, oh, don't make it such a big deal. It's just a kid. It's just a person. That they're probably full of fear because of the media. But then at the same time, this thing that just has happened to me, it's happened to me, and I was really frustrated. So I took it out on social media, wrote the post, and try to put it out there to other people. And then realizing there was so many smaller incidences like that all around, the area, and my close friends and colleagues. Some people say it's nothing, it'll pass. Some people say actually it's a big deal, we need to deal with it. But all in all, it's about being able to talk about this topic and share and express ourselves and our experiences, and how do we resolve it. Yeah, and this project came along. It was just perfect to apply.
I think it's pretty interesting because Fairfield itself is a pretty diverse area. It is, there is a high population of Chinese, Vietnamese people there. And the fact that this happened in an area like Fairfield, it makes me think what is going on in areas where there isn't a high population, a high Asian population, what's happening there? It must be worse, or so it's, I just find it shocking that even in an area like Fairfield, things like this happen.
Exactly. And watching Teresa, your work, it also becomes obvious that a lot of the violence is gender-based violence. A lot of women are targeted. And yeah, that's very disturbing. It's almost like, they seek out people who they think that they can violate in public because they don't think they'll respond back, right? So
yeah, I honestly think there's a lot of stereotypes attached to Asian women, and that just really incites violence. I feel like even in COVID-19, even though microaggressions per se, I felt like on the bus, I remember one time where I got stared at a lot, and there was very strong body language that he did not want to be anywhere near me. It was very cowering away, and kept staring at me at the corner of his eyes, and I couldn't really move. So even if I wanted to, social distance, I couldn't because the bus was pretty packed. So I felt kind of a bit of aggression, even though he didn't really say anything. It was just his body language. And I've had friends who have had more direct experiences where they have been thrown racist insults on the bus. And I think the worst part for them more than anything was that even after the said person left, no one said anything. No one comforted her. No one went up and tried to empathize with her. No one tried to help. So she was just left feeling really alone and defenseless.
Yeah, that's terrible. And in my experience, I feel like in Australia, we're very, as you were saying, sort of passive aggressive. A lot of things go unsaid. So you don't even know what you're experiencing is racism because it's so sort of coded, right? So
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Just like what you're saying, Gary, like I feel like a lot of these things, like, like they're meant to be said as jokes. And if we get offended, it's almost like, should I apologize because I got offended by your racist joke? Because someone I work with thought it would be funny. He was like, oh, do you know why COVID's not going to last? Oh, because it's made in China. And I was like, what's that supposed to mean? Is that meant to be funny? Because I'm not laughing. And if I get offended, and if I told him that that's offensive, like, would they think that I'm being oversensitive? And that's the thing about being a person of color. Like, you always have this feeling that, am I gonna offend white people for like telling them how I feel? That's the other part that, that goes into consideration.
Exactly. You're almost shamed into saying, why didn't you take the joke? Because it was a joke kind of thing, so. Dyan, I might actually start with a question for you on that note, actually. So you put out, you wrote a song, produced it, and made a music video and published it on YouTube. And so your work was inspired, if I can use that word, by a particular incident of racism in the queer community. And I wanted to ask you about how this has been during COVID. Sort of white gay men are sort of notorious for being racist already, but how did you manage this sort of COVID-related racism on top of sort of the existing bed of racism in the queer community?
I think, for me, like, well, first of all, I'll share that particular incident. I was DJing at a club, and it was a gay party. It was a big gay party. And this was right at the start of the pandemic. So I think it was like March, April last year. At that time, it was still very much the Chinese virus, like it's from China, this virus made in China. So like I left, it was like 3 a.m. and minding my own business, just leaving the venue. And I got approached by this, intoxicated gay white guy. And he just thought it would be funny to come up to me and like, hey dude, like, and I thought, oh, maybe he's gonna ask for my number or something. And I was like, oh dude, do you have like the coronavirus? And he just laughed and he was hysterical and just like, so what the hell? Like the worst part is I wanted to say something so badly, I was just frozen. But then I, kept that emotions and wrote a song about it. So I guess something good came out of that. So to answer your question, like, a lot of queer spaces are meant to be safe and inclusive, but they could also be, the space where you hear the most sexist, racist, vile, transphobic comments. So it's a shame. So for me, like I found after that incident, I spoke about it, shared it with my friends. And I feel like what really helped me was being able to find a community. So I'm close to a lot of cutie pop artists, creatives in the scene. And, just having that community to support and like having my back, that has really helped during that situation. And then creating art and being part of this project and sort of like seeing how other people have experienced similar experiences and being able to relate to that, I think it makes it stronger. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you. Teresa, I have a question for you. Dyan was just saying how he had this sort of very negative experience and he used that to write a song and turn that into something creative. So I guess I wanted to ask you about your creative work. You speak about how Asians are perceived by centuries of systematic racism, of these fantasies of the East Asian subservient woman, of the emasculated man, and other stereotypes. How do you respond to these stereotypes that are actually in motion in the here and now in your work, and how do you define yourself in your work?
Yeah. So I've always felt that systemic racism and stereotypes have always been the catalyst for like anti-Asian hate. Like COVID-19 was simply just like the trigger for underlying racism to sprout through under the guise of Asians bringing COVID-19 to Australia. And so like in my film, I talk about the fantasization of Asian women as the core reason for the Atlanta spa shootings that killed 8, when the white shooter intended to eliminate his temptation due to his sexual addiction, as if Asian women are simply just reduced to a temptation. And same thing with like masculization of Asian men, which has been evident through lack of strong Asian male leads, which has only recently started through movies like Shang-Chi, but really hasn't been helped by like nerdy roles that Asian men have been sought into. And I feel like that it's a sad realization that I can grow up exactly like you do and achieve the things that you do, but simply because I look different, and to someone's associations of a foreigner shrouded in like old and misguided stereotypes, I will be treated differently. And, you know, I've always seen myself as an Asian Australian, but I will introduce myself as Australian to questions like where am I from or what my nationality is, because that's the correct answer. But it's funny because even though it's very obvious that I'm Asian, it's often my ethnicity that people are more interested in than my nationality. As if finding out that I'm Chinese and not Japanese is going to change your worldview on me. Yeah.
Exactly. Thuy, I have a question for you. So your work is sort of a hybrid work, I guess, part TikTok video documentary style and part sort of narrative. And as Teresa was saying, sort of, you know, this sort of racism has been around for a long time, but it's really come affront because of COVID. And a lot of that is documented through our phones, on social media. You know, a lot of the footage that Teresa collected is actually on mobile phones, and your work is based on that. So it's a long-winded thing, but your background is actually in documentary and fashion. In fact, I remember you held the first ever Western Sydney Fashion Festival. So I just wanted to ask you a little bit about why you chose this form in terms of creating something on TikTok and actually using that sort of TikTok, you know, form to present your work.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yes, you are correct, Gary. I do come from like originally a documentary background, and then later on I got into community development, in particular for fashion creatives in Western Sydney, hence why I created an event called Western Sydney Fashion Festival. And it was actually inspired by a film festival called Colour Fest, which you started, Gary. Because I wanted to show like fashion, like film and other creative arts, it can be created by people of color, people who come from countries that don't speak English. It doesn't always have to come from like a particular group of people in mainstream media. And yeah, and then from there on, I guess because I've always done documentary, I wanted to kind of set myself a challenge. So with this particular set of this particular film, it's actually not a traditional documentary. It's actually more like a narrative. And I wanted to challenge myself and do something different because documentary is normally one person telling their story to the audience. Whereas I felt like the whole COVID racism Australian experience was something that not just one person experienced, but a whole collective of people experienced. That's why I wanted to challenge myself and do a narrative film instead. It still does have elements of the traditional documentary in it. It's got, you know, TikTok vlogging styles, lifestyles mixed into it. And it's inspired that by things that actually happened in real life. So someone watching it could be like, oh yeah, that happened to me, or oh, that happened to my friend. So it's like things that people could relate to and really identify with. And then I guess I'll just tell you a bit about the context of it. So back in 2020, in July, there was this explosion of viral videos on TikTok, the social media platform, of Chinese street style videos like that went really popular, completely viral. And it was actually being replicated by influencers outside of China. So by influencers in like America, Australia, countries where like I guess more Western countries. And it was kind of like, hang on, like just a few months ago you were all about like, you know, the China virus, this and that, and now all of a sudden we're cool and you like us now, like make up your mind, what is it? So I guess I wanted to show like the fickle nature of social media, and have it contrast against like what's happening in real life, like and I guess that's pretty much the context of my film. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So, you mentioned kind of Asian fashion or East Asian fashion, Chinese, Japanese, Korean fashion being sort of the forefront of fashion and these sort of TikTok videos. I had a question for Maria. So, there's a lot of cultural capital in fashion, but also traditionally sort of East Asian cultures have held cultural capital around martial arts, and you're a martial arts expert. So I just wanted to ask you about like, how do you combine, because you also write amazing comedy work. So how do you combine comedy and martial arts, but at the same time respecting sort of the spiritual and cultural significance of martial arts to your community?
I think for me, like, I always love seeing like strong female characters on screen doing action. And I've always gone back to the 80s where there were all a sleuth of, Asian women who are leads of films, right? So I always thought, what happened to that time? Why are women now sort of so sexualized, or they're the damsels in distress, or the dragon ladies, or the like those types of roles? Where are the strong roles? And I always wanted to bring back the past in my works. And that's why Operation Kung Flu came about, and why I love engaging in comedy, because when it comes to like these subject matters on racism and hate and xenophobia and all that, it's so mentally draining. It's whenever I turn on the news and I go, oh man, another thing just happened, and I get so infuriated, and I'm like, how do we subvert this? How do we get people to think about this topic but don't sort of run away from it? Because a lot of people do think, oh, it's someone else's problem. Someone got attacked, that's their issue, that's another country's issue. How do people watch content and go, oh wow, this is actually, I can watch this from beginning to end, not feel bad, but then, oh, I just got the message. So therefore, Operation Kung Flu kind of disrupts people's perceptions of what an 80s Hong Kong action sort of film looks like. And it's funny, once we put the trailer out, people thought there was a movie on it. They were like, where was this being made? Some people thought it was propaganda from China, which is another level of racism from it. But it was just interesting to see that it really got people thinking about this, what's been happening in the last 2 years in a very different light. And I think in a sense, for Asians, I feel it's empowering to see a bunch of Asians on screen and also have their own posters, you know what I mean? And the people that we casted for the film, they've had like, they're veterans in the industry. They've been on SBS, ABC, Channel 7. They've been playing a lot of stereotypes and some really good dramatic roles, but we see them on screen, but never I guess there hasn't been an opportunity for them to come together in a platform to also fight racism through their craft. So that's why this project came about the way it did.
Yeah, I definitely recognize some familiar faces, and you're absolutely right. Comedy is such a great way to disarm someone who might be defensive and unwilling to engage in a topic. And I think your work really does that. And I'm always impressed by the production value of your work. Like, it's so well put together, like everything from all the art department stuff, the poster stuff, to the editing, to the choreography. It's amazing.
And I also think it's not something that I just want to go, oh, it's an Asian Australian. I want globally people to go, oh my gosh, this is a really catchy thing that's being made. Oh, it's made in Australia. What's going on over there? So I think for me, in the guise of like a high budgeted, even though it's so shoestring budget, and making it high budget value can garner that attention. And yes, we had amazing cast and crew on board to make it happen, because they believed in the craft, they believed in the script and the story. And even though at first people were like, oh, are you sure it's not going to turn out racist? Which is, when you read off script, it feels that way. But I'm like, I trust in my instincts. I trust that, after doing a lot of research and through all the films I've made, I think this is right to do. It might ruffle people's feathers, but we got to do this. And we end up making it, and it ended up turning out pretty well.
Exactly. Turned out great. Just letting the audience know we're halfway through the panel discussion. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Facebook chat or in the Zoom chat. We have someone in the Facebook chat monitoring the comments, so we'll get the questions. So Maria was saying how the work that you created is actually not just for an Australian audience. It translates really well to the broader Asian diaspora around the world, in the US, UK, Europe, so on. And on that note, I guess this idea of like not all Asians are not the same. I'm Asian, you know, I'm South Asian. So I guess, Jackie, I wanted to bring you into this question. Your heritage is Cambodian, and I wanted to ask you about how do you articulate your Cambodian heritage within the broader Asian Australian identity, especially at a time like COVID, where sort of Southeast Asian, East Asians are all kind of grouped in one and seen as Chinese. And I just wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one because
Jackie, I think you're on mute.
Oh, can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you, Jackie.
Oh, you can hear me? Okay. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one because, you know, I've grown up in this country. I've spent most of my life in Tasmania. But
sorry, so Jackie, just one second. I think it's skipping. So I'm gonna come back to you. I might actually, if it's okay, if you log out and come back in, that might be good because I think it's skipping.
All right.
Other people having issues hearing that too, right? Or is it just my computer?
I can hear Jackie fine, so I'm not sure what's going on.
Yeah.
Oh, it's my computer.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna. Sorry, Jackie, go on. It was my speaker.
No worries. Okay. Feel free to interrupt me if there's any more issues as well. But yeah, as I was saying, sort of being raised in this country and living most of my life in Tasmania, I actually don't necessarily identify as Australian or Cambodian, but I think there's a really interesting opportunity to kind of identify as this Asian Australian, you know, which allows us to kind of collectivize in a way where a lot of us don't have that really strong connection to either being Australian or being from you know, the Asian country that our family was from. But yeah, really talking to sort of all of you and also other Asian people within my community, we do have very similar experiences, kind of living in this sort of colonial Western country, but also having that second identity to kind of blend together. And as a child, it was a really like a struggle for me to you know, understand those two identities. But I think projects like this, and big thanks to Diversity Arts Australia for bringing us all together, it really allows us to kind of build that own identity that we have. And I think there's a lot of strength and a lot of, you know, beauty in this Asian Australian community and yeah, the culture that we can create.
Thank you. I guess the next question I had, Dyan, I think I'll come back to you. I want to know, I guess, outside of sort of COVID-related racism, how COVID has impacted you as a performance artist, and just a little bit about how you've survived or even thrived during this time.
Yeah, sure. I think as a musician, a DJ, a performer, someone is used to always going out and have to put a look together and be on stage, or sometimes perform on top of the bar. It was, you know, quite upsetting to have everything canceled just like that. So for me, like the most recent lockdown, I think that's the question. It was, I actually really enjoy being quiet and being able to create new work, because I think we live in a society where, like, you know, we just feel like we constantly need to achieve things and tick boxes. So just taking time out to write new music and, you know, to rediscover my voice and my narrative, which I then wrote a song called Narrative. If I may share it with everyone, it's a track that I wrote about sort of redefining and reclaiming how our stories are told. Especially like what Teresa was saying, and you know, an Asian man, especially as a queer Asian person, our bodies are often hypersexualized or desexualized. So I wrote a song about that, and I discovered footage of my ancestor home in China, and I did like a 3D art video in collaboration with another Asian Australian artist. So yeah, so I spent a lot of time reflecting on those things, and yeah, learning more about where I come from.
And so you said you wrote this song. Is it on YouTube? Like, can we find it? Or
yeah, the track's on Spotify, and the 3D art video is also on YouTube. So it's a synth pop track with guzheng, which is a Chinese traditional instrument incorporated. It's like a East meets West production.
Great. And so what can we look forward to now that we're out of lockdown, I guess, from you? Because I think you run a cabaret thing at the Beta Tit and if, yeah.
Yeah, if I may share this, I apologize if I keep plugging my work. So we received a grant from the City of Sydney, and we're also supported by the Inner West Council to produce Sydney's first, or dare I say Australia's first social event, nightlife in the queer nightlife scene, the first ever event that's catered towards cutie pop, especially queer Asian performers and artists. So we're actually launching this new night called Dynasty. So it's on December 3rd at the Red Rattler. And the lineup is 100% queer Asian. So it'll be a fabulous night. Yeah. If you want to come and check it out, details on Facebook.
Great. I'll be there. I'm sure Darts will share that as well. Thuy, I have a question for you around, you were talking about how you were really interested in community cultural development and working on sort of projects that benefit the community. I wanted to ask you about the process of making your short film, and was it collaborative, and what was the process, and who did you work with, and were they people you've worked with before?
Yeah, so I guess I'm really lucky to come from an environment where I do have a lot of support, especially from Maria Tran, Phoenix Eye, Diversity Arts. So when coming up with this idea, I was really, I guess, anxious or scared because it was like my first work that wasn't a documentary. It was really new to me and I wasn't sure if it was going to be good or not. And I remember I wrote a script by myself at first and I was like, oh, it's probably not a great script. And then I just showed it. I showed it to Maria, I showed it to other filmmakers, my peers and stuff, and took on their feedback. So I guess I was really lucky that I did have a lot of support. And once again, I'd like to thank Diversity Arts for believing in the project. And I guess the takeaway from that story is that even if it's not perfect, like the script you write or the project you make is not perfect, I think still do it, and then you'll never know what might happen.
Thank you. Maria, we were just talking about Phoenix Eye for a moment. And I guess I wanted to ask you one question. Now, not many people know this, but I know that you graduated with a degree in psychology because you and I go back a long way. So has this degree helped with your storytelling? Yeah, I wanted to ask you that question. And then I wanted to open up to the broader panel. As Asian Australians, how you kind of have to navigate a safe career while pursuing your creative and artistic goals. And I wanted to ask you, Maria, also about Phoenix Eye and how you've kind of created work for yourself through that.
Yeah. So, my psychology degree, I would like to think it has helped me. That's why I tell people. Otherwise, people are like, what's that for? But I feel like I do love understanding human nature, whether it is through peace or conflict. A lot of the works that I do, I'm always wanting to really investigate that. And even as an actor, that's really helped me to thrive in that area. Now, when it comes to Phoenix Eye, the film production company, I didn't really envision myself making a film production company to start off with. But I was like working from contract to contract, job to job. And I'm like, I just want to make my own stuff. And I just can't just sit there and wait. But what if you make your own thing? You make your own thing, you build a team, you support each other. That means we have more control to tell the stories we want to tell. And I think making that company was one of the best things. It was probably one of a milestone in my life. I'm like, yep, if I was to die and live again, I'll do it again, because it's given me more control and more power to be able to tell stories that myself and the community that I also am a part of want to tell. So it's helped a lot. And on top of that, you're seen a little bit more differently. Sometimes I feel like as an artist, you're just an artist. You're like this struggling artist. But yeah, I've got a company. Doesn't matter how many people in the company or how small or big it is. But when they say company, it's like, oh, you mean business. So you know how to do all your the paperwork side, the business side. And I think I feel like you're seen in a different light. But I really think that for me, it's all in all, I just want to make stuff. And I really encourage a lot of artists out there who are struggling to look at the business side, how to find themselves in a more sustainable sort of level. Yes, you got to find your bread and butter, but eventually you want to find a bread and butter that you can continuously do to then make the films or make the projects you want to make. And you got to see yourself in a big picture, not just like what's going to happen in 2022, 23. You got to see it in the long run, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years as well. So I think it's important that we have that sort of perspective in our trajectory as artists.
Absolutely. I feel like we should add entrepreneur to your list of achievements. And, it's obvious Phoenix Eye has had a flow-on effect with Thuy and many people in Western Sydney who have worked with you and then gone on to do great things themselves. I just want to ask the rest of the panel, like, what is your bread and butter? How do you sort of sustain yourself? How do you please your parents as, Asian diasporic kids? Thuy?
Well, I guess, my story is that I did a film degree and my parents didn't understand that at all. They were like, I don't understand what you're doing with your life, kind of thing. And then after my film degree, I realized that having film skills is not enough. You need to have more skills to be able to back up your film like skills. So you make a film, but then what are you going to do with it? You have to know how to market your film. You have to learn how to get your film in the right places. So I would say my bread and butter right now is that I have a day job in digital marketing, and I know that the skills I do in that job I would be able to transfer over to my films and my filmmaking skills and all the work I do for the community through Western Sydney Fashion Festival. So I feel like I have the arts which are backed up by these skills which we're able to take it beyond and in front of more people. So that's how I see my bread and butter.
Thank you. Jackie?
Yeah, I guess my bread and butter would be sort of my photography and videography business. So yeah, I do a lot of work in the community, especially for Footscray Community Arts Centre, which allows me to sort of fund all of the fun creative projects as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Also, I kind of feel weird saying bread and butter because I feel like amongst us all Asians, rice would be like a better than bread and butter.
Rice and soy sauce. Yeah, that's right.
Dyan, what's your source of rice?
What's my sorry?
What's your what do you are you a full-time musician, a performer? Do you work elsewhere to sustain yourself?
I wish I could be a full-time artist, but I do have a day job. I work in sales, but I do find that these days I first started as a singer-songwriter and a performer, but then I started doing more DJ stuff on the side as well, so that helps to pay the bills. Yeah, it's a lot of DJ work.
Cool. Teresa?
Yeah, so my one was a bit of a risk. I kind of dropped out of uni, and I've kind of been interested in going into acting, so impulsively going to acting school next year, we'll see. But I guess in terms of like financial wise, like I worked at like Sydney Trains for a whole year full-time, shift work, tiring, but I've kind of thought of this year as kind of testing out the waters for what I could do creatively. So I'm kind of relying on that. Worst case scenario, take a part-time job, but yeah, that's kind of the roundabout where I'm going.
That's great. I'm noticing in terms of, I guess, migrant kids and migrant communities in terms of entering the arts, the second generation find it a lot easier because I feel like when you're a first generation, you're kind of trying to get back to, what you left and trying to, kind of build capital and both social and financial capital. And then the next generation, so it's great that you're actually able to commit to your artistry, though I'm assuming that you didn't migrate here recently. Did you grow up here? Were you born here?
Yeah, I was born here.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So my money's on the thing then. I have a question for you, Teresa. So you point out how we as Asians and migrants in general have to be sort of exceptional to be received as Australians, to be recognized as Australians, and we don't get to be sort of the average white Australian. Can you tell me a little bit about the impact of this on you, as well as the broader Asian demographic?
Yeah. I guess it's kind of that you're not celebrated unless you're helping the white cause or representing Australia. For example, like Olympians for the minority who are Asian don't really get trashed on because they're representing the nation. And then, that's when, they're favored. But outside of that, when we're not like exceptional, but still talented in and of itself, we suddenly like jump back into the foreigner paradox where no matter if we are a normal, hardworking citizen that contributes to the country, taxes and all, we're always seen as a foreigner who steals the jobs of like white Australians. And it's kind of saying like, regardless of how we grew up here, what our story is here, like you still have an Asian face, which is why I called my film Asians Are Not Just a Face, because our face is always the first and main reason why we receive racism, because all of our stereotypes go straight to our face. It doesn't matter what we do behind the scenes. If all they can see is an Asian face and nothing else, anti-Asian hate will simply continue to thrive.
Exactly. Jackie, I had a question for you. So you worked with a Japanese Australian artist. Can you tell me a little bit about your reason for this collaboration, and how was it like working with someone from a different Asian diasporic background?
Yeah, so my short film was based on El Shimada, who is a violinist. She's a Japanese musician living in Melbourne. And I guess I was really inspired to sort of work on this project with her because she is a really big voice within her community. She's always trying to sort of be really proactive about helping others, and spends a lot of her time doing that community work. And I had a conversation with her about how at the start of the virus, she experienced discrimination where she was attacked in the street, which is what the film is about. But through that conversation, she was just really, really positive and really, she worked through kind of that pain in a way that I was really inspired by. And so I thought that was, a really important part to include in the film. And I think when we have these kind of racist experiences or tensions, we kind of carry that feeling. We don't really know what to do with it. And so, violin and creativity is such a huge part of her life, as well as community. And she was able to sort of channel that energy back into that and turn it into something really positive. And so, I just found that really inspirational. And then as for working with someone from a different diasporic background, Asian is such a big category. Like all of us have such different experiences and very different cultures. But as I was saying before, sort of that Asian Australian identity is something that we all have in common. And, we have a lot of similarities within our experiences, within our perceptions. And I think that sort of working with her, I found out that we do have a lot in common, and we are able to sort of work through it in a way together that is very similar as well.
Great, thank you. So I guess we're in the last 10 minutes, and I'm just gonna, there's a question, I'm just gonna read it out. Have any of the creators ever had positive feedback from someone who may have been racist or engaged with racist behavior? Like based on the work that you've done? No. I think it's very hard. I mean, rarely do people come forward and say that they were racist. That I think, I feel like it's worse to be called racist than to be a racist. I think that's sort of the, I think nothing triggers white people more than calling them racist. So I hardly imagine someone would have come forward and said that they were racist.
I find
Sorry, go on.
I find that even for my work, Operation Kung Flu, we have this character over here named Ronald, and he's like he's a racist guy, but he's a nice guy. And I get people emailing me, white people, who say, "Oh, I really love that character. He was so interesting." I'm like, oh crap, I hope you got the the message rather than identifying with the character. But hey, they watched the film, so I guess hopefully something got into their heads. But yeah, so sometimes I find that maybe they might not see racism as like what you've put out there as a play upon or a parody, but they don't see that. They think it's a film, a cool film. And I'm like, no, there's actually, but then for me, after that, I realized actually they harbor a lot of these sort of like, thoughts about, identity and racism and Asianness and fetishism that they don't even know, but it was even good for them to even connect. So at least it's a good opportunity for me to say, actually, that's kind of racist, and I'll tell you why. So, yeah.
Thanks, Maria.
In my film, there's a particular scene where the main character gets like attacked away by a person, and it's like they bump into each other, and it's like something like bloody Asians go home. So it will be interesting to see that if this film was ever shown in front of an audience that was predominantly not Asian, it will be pretty interesting to see what their reaction would be like. I don't know if anyone else's works had scenes or addressed certain scenarios like that, and whether you thought how it would be received by a non-Asian audience.
Yeah, I mean, Dyan, in your work, in your song, you actually don't demonize this person who's sort of struggling to breathe or holding their breath around. You kind of sort of pity them or try to sort of have some empathy towards them. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so with the track that I wrote, it spoke about, I know I caught you off guard, but you don't have to, hold your breath, you can breathe around me. So I think it's more about, the moral of the story is, I feel like, I might get into trouble for saying this. I feel like a lot of movement can also be like, oh, like we hate white people, but it's not like that. I feel like we all need to work together. We all need to work on how we can actively be anti-racist together, so the song is really about just understanding, and the lyrics, you can breathe around me, you don't have to hold your breath. I feel like it's just to end the song and the lyrics in a positive note. That's the intention behind the song. Did that answer the question? I hope it did.
Yeah, it did. I think it's an important question around building a narrative as well, and I'm interested in everyone's opinion on this, is that if you kind of write a one-sided character, entirely demonize someone, it doesn't resonate. So I think some of the greatest work I've seen is when even the most misogynist or racist or transphobic or the most problematic of people, if you humanize them, I think you're more likely to resonate with that person in real life who's also doing that. Whereas if you just make them a right up like antagonist, enemy, then people just sort of, oh, that's not me, I can't be that person. And I think, Teresa, you kind of touched on this in your work where you talk about being married to an Asian person does not make you an anti-racist. And having friends who are Asian does not make you an anti-racist. You could still have these sort of underlying things. And Maria, like that child probably learned that from his or her family or the environment they're in, yeah. I'm going to read another question. Okay. I have a question regarding being called Asian Australian artists. Do you think this puts us in another category that particularly points out that we are Asian Australian and not just artists? Do you think this push for diversity and being heard contributes more to the white narrative, who are trying to be politically correct, or might have tokenism with projects? Wow, that's a very deep question. Who wants to take that?
I can contribute my feelings about this topic. I've just got two examples to share. So for me, like in the queer space, in the arts and music scene, I feel like cutie pop is trending. People recognize the importance of diversity in the lineup.
And Dyan, do you want to spell out cutie pop, what it means, in case people? Yeah.
Yeah, so Cutie Plot refers to queer, trans people of color. So there's building awareness, growing awareness of diversity in a lineup in arts and music, which is good, which is fantastic. But then, you know, we also need promoters to recognize that they shouldn't be booking people just to tick a box. You know, I have one person of color in the lineup. Yeah, so like we're diverse. And, you know, I'm gonna have a whole group of Black people or Asian people on stage at the same time. Like, what we need to have a think about what the intention is behind those decisions. And we need to make sure, because I'm an event producer as well, when you involve people from different cultural backgrounds, the most important thing is consulting with them from start to finish and developing together instead of just giving them the job, just push you on stage, do your thing. So the most important thing for me, in my perspective, is to have that process where you consult with the community. And just very quickly, the other part to this question is, I am actually really proud to show my Asian heritage when I perform. So I use that in my music, in my costumes. I perform with Chinese operatic makeup, because for me, I didn't see a problem with that, because I wish when I came out, you know, when I started to go out 10 years ago in the scene, in the queer scene, in the music scene, I wish there was someone that I could look up to, because for a very long time, I didn't have a queer Asian role model to look up to. You know, even like the drag queens on Oxford Street were all white, you know, so I wish I had that. So when I have that platform to be seen, it could be a small event or I could be singing on the bar top or a bigger stage. Like, I wear that with pride. You know, if I have one person say that to me after a show that they've been inspired to see me, I feel like my job is done, because I wish I had that. So yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else have thoughts on this?
I just wanted to add, like, in regards to tokenism with projects, working in the creative arts sector, you're gonna be meeting a lot of different people, working on a lot of different projects, and I think with time you'll be able to pick out who is being genuine and authentic about working with you, and who is just using you for the tokenism of, like, we need a person of color to tick a box to get more funding. So I think you yourself as an artist, you will learn to, like, be able to pick that out and know who you want to work with and who you don't want to work with. So, yeah.
Exactly. And the question also too is not just who's on the project, who's making the decisions, right? I think, because often I think in these organizations, it might look diverse, but the decisions are still being made by a predominantly white group. Anyone else?
I just wanted to add, I think an important note with those projects as well, for people who are kind of wanting to include diversity and people from, you know, marginalized backgrounds that generally don't have the same opportunities in those positions, it's so important to be creating a safe space for that as well. A lot of times when it is tokenism, you know, you can go to an event or something like this as that sort of token, and the space doesn't feel safe, or it doesn't feel like it's set up for, you know, this diversity to come in. And so I think that's a really important thing with those projects. Yeah, and for the people who are creating those projects.
Thank you. Maria, I wanted to ask you, because a lot of your work references Hong Kong cinema, and sort of, how do you sort of, I guess, marry that with your Vietnamese heritage? Like, you know, and does that matter, you know?
Well, to be honest with you, growing up, I didn't watch like The Neighbours or The Home and Away. We watched Hong Kong cinema. That was the export into Australia. So I grew up a lot with that, and that allowed me to go, you know, we could be like, you know, the stars or the forefront in our own narratives. And I think that's the platform I keep on using time and time again. Some people might think, oh, it's a very genre thing, it's a very niche thing, but then outside of Australia, it's a huge thing. There's a huge market. And I'm like, maybe if I keep going down that path, it's going to like lead me to somewhere. But in terms of the title Asian Australians, like for me, if I was to say I'm an artist, I'm not going to get, like, I feel like I wouldn't get the support. And I feel like there's more support as an Asian Australian artist at the moment. And I feel like there's people I can connect with, and there's certain common things that we experience that we can sometimes get together and vent, and we would understand it. If I went off to another person and vented what I was going through, they wouldn't get it. They'll think, oh, I'm complaining, I'm whiny, I'm ungrateful to be in this country, all sorts of things, right? So yes, some people might say it's a title. Do you want to be defined by that title? To be honest, if we feel safe, we like to hold on to that title. If we grow out of that title, that's still okay, as long as we know that we've been supported in our trajectory as an artist through these different collectives, and know that we are wanting to make work that actually speaks out against the injustices that are happening around the world.
Exactly. Thank you, Maria. Teresa, do you have any thoughts on this before we wrap up?
Everyone said it very eloquently. I think the only thing is just a similar thing. It's just honestly consult people about how they want to be addressed, especially like with Asian Australians. I feel like we're proud to be who we are and our identity. And it's not necessarily us being like, oh, stereotyped into only Asian Australian, but like, this is who we are. This is what we want to represent. And when we see other Asian Australians, we support each other, and we like to, enjoy each other's content. And I think, it's not just stereotypes. It's really just about us embracing our identity of who we are.
Yeah, and there's a sense of community in that, I think.
Absolutely.
So we're almost out of time, so I'm going to wrap up. So thank you to all of you for participating, for being so generous with your answers and your time. I just want to give a shout out once again to the I'm Not a Virus website that has profiles of your profiles and of your work. I know not all of your work has come out. I imagine some of them are going to do festivals and have other release dates with their trailers and information about your work that's on the I am not a virus australia.org.au website. I would also like to mention DARTS, Diversity Arts Australia, for all the hard work they've done to realize this project, and I encourage you to check out their website. And if you like newsletters, sign up to their monthly newsletter to keep update on all the great projects that they do. And finally, I also want to plug a project that I run at Afters called Talent Camp, which is for emerging screen creatives, mostly screenwriters, but also open to directors and producers from diverse backgrounds. It's open for submissions at the moment. So if you're from any part of Australia, except for WA and the territories, you can apply to participate in this project. So yeah, if you're an emerging filmmaker, please, from a diverse background, please consider that. On that note, thank you so much, and have a good lunch.
Thank you so much, Gary.
Bye, everyone.